really, really up there with good signage and good plant labeling throughout the garden, which is a real necessity for any self-respecting garden. But now also we have all the plants we have for sale propagated from our own collections, which means many of them are unique. You will not get them anywhere else. And we have an up-to-date, every week we update our plant list, what is available. You can reserve them online and pick them up, or you can come in person. So if you want to see our collections without walking through the garden first, also we're trying to identify things in the garden as they're blooming, by identifying which ones of those are for sale. But you will find incredible things that you can't get anywhere else. And as gardeners, isn't that what we want? The envy of our neighbors and friends. I have one that you don't have, and I'm not giving you that. Anyway, so today we're talking about succulents, which is obviously a big topic because there's a lot of plants that call themselves succulents for various reasons. And there seems to be a craze on them now. With COVID particularly, there was a big uplift in houseplants. As a matter of fact, let's go to the next slide. And this one is
Come on. There we go.
I hope you're going to center those slides now. Anyway,
Oh,
go back.
hold on.
Yeah, they're a little bit.
Yeah, go back.
Okay, there we go.
This one. Why is this appropriate? Because people kill their succulents. The easiest plants in the world, and they kill them. How do they kill them? They water them. Why are they watering succulents? A succulent is succulent, saftig, juicy, full of water. And why are succulents succulent? Because no matter what part of the plant, stem, root, tuber, leaf, flower, if it has succulent characteristics, that means it evolved in a climate area where there was some seasonal drought of some duration. Whether it was 3 months, or 6 months, or 10 months, or 10 years, succulent plants are adapted to go for a long period with no additional irrigation or rainfall. If you water them, if you assume that something is dry and thirsty, it's so thirsty, it hasn't had water since May, you're going to kill it. And it's good for the plant business, right? Let's go buy another one. I don't know why, but it died. So if it looks mushy, you killed it. If it looks a little withered or shrunken and otherwise healthy, that means it's dormant and it's resting. Don't disturb it. Don't just confuse it with little water. So succulents is not a characteristic of any particular taxon. This family, or that genus. Although there are some families that have a lot of succulents in them, like cactus, for instance. Cactus are mostly stem succulents, right? Mostly various other kinds of succulents go along. They're leaf succulents. Remember, it can be all the plants, or some of the parts. Succulents are native to areas around the world, in desert zones, in subtropical zones, and in Mediterranean. So things like aloes and agaves, which are divergent evolution. You have aloes from South Africa, and at first glance they look exactly like agave, right? So succulent leaves, aloes, and then there evolves lots of geophytes or succulents as well. So let's move on away from this one, but it's true. Death will come for your plants. And you know who you are. How many of you have ever had a succulent die? Shame. Now I've killed it. My favorite garden quotation is, I consider every new plant perfectly hardy until I've killed it myself. And that's at least a huge set of parameters. So here's the succulent garden outside. The topic of tonight is the succulent containers, because we're talking about the tofu. Tufa. The tofu containers from last week. Containers are containers, but sometimes even a landscape is a container. If you have rocks, if your plants are growing among rocks or narrow garden beds, you can think of that as a container as well. And one of the interesting things about succulents, because they have the ability to store water and nutrients over long periods, many of them do not have very extensive root systems, which means you can put them in small containers and they'll be happy. But do not cram a huge plant into a small container. Sometimes you see for shows, you can tell that poor plant was happily resting in an 8-inch pot, and now it's in a teacup, waiting to die.
So here's an outdoor garden. It's very similar to the succulent, one of the succulent gardens we have at the Arboretum. All the aloes are finished now, but we have an incredible collection of aloes, mostly South Africa and up the African coast. Next slide. And here's a little container that I threw together while I was repotting some other stuff. And this is how easy it is. These are leftovers. They were things that were on the floor, and you just pick them up, stick them in the dirt. Well, not quite. People will press a succulent into your hands and say, just put it in the dirt. But what risk do you have there? If it is not dried, if you haven't dried out that stem, it will possibly rot. Fungus bacteria likes that moisture. And if you stick that juicy stem wound into the soil, there's bound to be microbes in there. So this one was just to throw together. And this one is after some almost frozen weather. We did not get down to freezing, but succulents, they're like grapes. They're full of water. And what happens when water freezes? It expands. And so you can go out and find your lovely Haworthias exploded like little water balloons. Next, please. So here's my front yard. This is 1 year in. I'm using my own slides for a change because normally I show everybody else's gardens in mine, but I moved from Aptos after 6 years there and having a largish garden with lots of succulents to a very small house in Santa Cruz near the university. And these were all cuttings from my old garden. And the garden is now 11 months old from plain gravel. What did I do first? Ripped out all the overgrown shrubs and you couldn't see the house. It was truly, it was a hoarder house, you know, and it was, the yard was a reflection of that. In any case, it was soggy, and I thought, you can't have soggy succulents. And I wanted to have a no irrigation lawn, absolutely no irrigation at all. And so the first thing I did was pull out all the existing plants, I just ignored the existing so-called lawn and put in 4 inches of gravel. No landscape fabric, no gopher wire, 4 inches of gravel, which meant that as I planted, I was planting down through the gravel instead of planting in the dirt and then mulching it with gravel, which is what most people do. That means your root crown is way down there under the gravel, pressed against the soil where it stays moist. So my plants, their roots, their little root ends are in the soil, but the root crown is above the gravel. So I've had not a single death from rotting. Now in the back, there's a different story I'll tell you about that. Well, how many of you had things rot in the rain? Agaves, mature agaves, turning black from the bottom and turning to slime.
Yeah.
I never expected it. That's what happens when succulents get too much water. And if they're cold and wet, it's even faster. All right, next. So here are different kinds. We have a Euphorbia lactea there, it's a stem succulent. So the Slepiads, the milkweed family, you know, Slepiads and Apocinaceae here now in the same group. How many of you keep up with your taxonomy? How many of us are too old to learn any new families? Well, in my business, you have to do it, but they're making more and more decisions based on genetics rather than appearance. So there's a lot of reason for it. However, it's really hard for me to take acers, you know, good old maples, and say now they're in Saponaceae, because Saponaceae is a subtropical family of trees to me, but you know, now they're all one big cast. So here we have leaf suckers. There's a yucca. There's some euphorbias. There's some crassulas. There are a couple of families that almost all their members are succulents, like Crassulaceae. You know, everything from Kalanchoe to sedums. There's a lot of succulents in that family. Next.
Yeah.
Next. Here's a stem succulent. It's an adenium or adenia. I have both, and I can never which. Both from northeast Africa into Saudi Arabia. They call it the desert rose. And they're wonderful stem succulents. They're swollen things, Codex plants. How many of you are into that? Codex. They're really wonderful. They are built for major dormancy. They can go for up to 11 or 12 months with no water at all. And once the water comes again, they will start growing and bloom. And so this one has been really good. So I pruned it at the end of its dry season. Not like that. But being that little Dorstenia, how many of you know Dorstenia? That's a real fat plant for aficionados, they're easy to kill, but they're members of the Fig family. The ficus and all those huge things with Dracaena have these inverted flowers, just like figs are, the flowers are the inside. What we think is the fruit is actually the receptacle. So these sort of Dracaenas didn't quite close, they're little stars, and very interesting floral parts. So another Dracaena feather, which means quite stinky. Next. And this one is a Pachyformis from Baja California. This one was found on the beach. It's probably a 60-year-old specimen. It's an old tree stump that happened to have one living branch on it. And they grow prostrate on the beach in Baja down the Mexican coast. And they're wonderful flowers. They're really tough, and they make a nice little zigzagging pattern. If you're into bonsai, this one is a bonsai with no trying at all, with that very, very plump stem. And they have the most early little pink flowers too. So you have this incredible strong form, and then little delicate pink flowers all over it in the spring. Next, please. So another stem is succulent. How many of you grow these ground orchids? Do any of you? This red one here in the front? Yeah. Orange, lavender, purple, and red. And they make new plants. As they are blooming, they make plantlets with their own roots that drop off and fall to the earth. They're a great background plant. The plants are just big, messy scrambles of orchid leaves, but it blooms 12 months a year.
Mark.
Yeah.
Hold it.
Hold it up there. Okay. What's the genus on that again? The orchid.
I thought I would tell you that, but that's the Chinese ground orchid.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll give you some. I've got more than enough. That's the other nice thing about succulents. Whenever anybody comes by and admires one, you can either rip one up or take a leaf or something. It's the best sharing plant. It's really the joy of succulents, and it is fun. But with succulents, because they're some fast growing, some slow growing, you have to know how to manipulate. Reproduction is easy. Talk about that in a second. So, water. The reason they're succulent is because they're not used to getting year-round. So when you have a succulent, they do not require watering every month of the year, the way plants from temperate zones do, or from even moderate temperate zones. You know that it needs to be dormant. What you have to know is when it's dormant. Sometimes it's summer dormancy when it's hot and dry. Sometimes it's winter dormancy when it's cold. Right? Where is it cold and dry? Not too many places. Usually we expect our rain in the cooler season, but you know that they don't need water all year round. And I have some plants that get water 4 times a year. One little pick me up in October, just to get them through this shorter days, and then January, February, March. And on the January watering, they get the fertilizer. That's it for the year. One time, 4 waterings, that's all they need. They're very, very frugal with their water. Some of them even photosynthesize down inside the leaf, like Haworthias and some of the other South African succulents. They have window cells. You notice those patterns of dark cells. It's not pigment, it's actually transparent cells where the photosynthesis is happening down. So keep in mind, difference between Florida and California. Florida is a monsoon climate, hurricanes in the summer. Right? Here in the California coast, we're a Mediterranean climate, rain only in the cooler months. We like to call it winter. But here's a little rant I have going these days, because all the advertising says spring flowers, as if we were in New York or Washington or Maine or somewhere. When is spring here? For me, spring is when the rains come. Spring started for us in October this year. That's when things broke dormancy. Things have been blooming their butts off for months, and all of a sudden, come see the spring flowers, as if we were all living in Holland or something. People are very confused. Who don't grow up in California definitely come with this idea of 4 seasons. But here we have an ever expanding dry season, and we have a short wet season, except for this year. Remember, these are long-term averages that make climate, not individual weather events. So remember, There's gonna be a dormant period. That's all you have to know about your succulent is when does it want to be growing? It's cool, when it's hot. And during that period, it gets no water and it doesn't need it. If you think, oh, it must be thirsty, you're wrong, we'll kill it. I can't emphasize that enough. Next.
But what do you do when it rains and you have a lot of heavy containers and you're not
Then
gonna?
you tip them on their sides. You get the help in. That would be me, which is why my back hurts all the time. And I laid all my pots on the side after the second week of rain in January. I thought these succulents really don't like this, especially Albopoliphilia. Polyphylla, some of the more thin tissued ones. Lay your pots down. And I have to tell you too, by February, when things hadn't dried up and it kept on raining, I was going around my garden pulling up the euphorbia cuttings and pulling up the new agave cuttings because they were starting to rot. And you can save them. You can pull them up, even if they started to rot, dry them out, cut off the rotten parts, then dry them out and let them sit for a few months until the fungus or bacteria has gone completely dry and gone away. Yes.
Is there an easy way to look up the?
Yeah, it's all in Google. Yeah. It's really, there's some wonderful books, especially the South African ones about succulents. But in any case, you can deal with wet season. Most of these succulents, as I say, do not have very extensive root masses, right? So you can yank it up out of soil. I tend to be brutal that way. People say, oh my God, you're killing the plant. Well, it's not like you're cutting off your kitten's legs or something. It's a plant. So you have to be brisk, rough, and you have to let your plant know you saved it. Now grow. So reproduction. Succulents have many wonderful ways of reproducing because they have stem cells, literally stem cells, totipotent cells that can develop either into leaf, into stem, into flower. They haven't decided yet. And so if you have a succulent stem that elongates like this, you can see it's making new little plantlets there. But you also know if you broke off one of those leaves and laid it on the ground and let it dry and don't water it, it will make a new tiny plantlet at the end of that leaf. Next. You can also break the stem into pieces. And remember, when you do take cuttings from succulents, next, you've got to let them dry. Got to let them dry before you can put them in the soil. Start watering. They can go for months without watering. This is what people don't want to believe. They're not roses, not gardenias. You know. Succulents are able to sit unwatered for months. Doesn't know which ones they are. So here we are in Echeveria. Well, it depends. As Ernesto Sandoval Davis says, say it loud and say it proud. That gets us past all the trouble of Latin names. How many of you know your Latin names? It helps. I mean, what's a daisy? There are 8 million things called daisy. So common names only get you so far. But if you really not want to know what your species is. But you know what's even more useful for me is just family. Go straight to family. The Rosaceae. They have so many things in common. And most of the succulent families are the same way. They are really just different forms of a very similar organism. So if you know your taxonomy, it makes your gardening a lot easier. Next, yeah, Echeveria is actually hard to do if you don't really like to take on big roots. Here's one cute little thing. These fell off while I was repotting, and so I put them in there. And you can see even after a couple of weeks, there are new plants forming.
Yeah.
And now those are new plants of their own, growing outside, getting ready to be transplanted. Next. Here are some other parts. These are leaf succulents, Senecio. They call them blue chalk sticks. They all have sort of weird Senecios. You've seen these, right? There's a whole bunch of different ones. It used to be one kind, that's all you got. Sort of pencil sized, and that was it. Now they have really small ones. And I have one that has giganto leaves. The leaves are almost like cucumbers, and the shrub is this tall and it's keeping on growing, which I never expected for these. These are the simplest things in the world. These, you can just break them up and throw them on the ground. And literally, you can throw them on the ground, they'll put some roots out, and then you'll have a whole puddle of blue. Those are great for giveaways. You just can't kill them. Well, maybe try. This is the cutting area down below the deck, where things are waiting to be cut up. Otherwise, dispersed, propagated. Burrow's tail, this little crasslaceous thing. These are lovely. How many of you have had these? And every time you touch them, the leaves fall off.
Yeah.
Do you have rat problems with those? Because I'm finding something's eating mine, driving me.
Rodents
nuts.
do eat them.
Who
yeah.
does?
Rodents will eat them.
Mice, wolves.
I don't have rat problems at home. We do at the Arboretum because we have this huge buffet laid out. We try to put wire cages over our flats. We try to put rat barriers, or a determined rat is like a goat. It's going to find them. Anyway, so these are wonderful, but the thing is with these burrow-tails, some of the more sensitive ones where the leaves drop, that's the strategy for how they send new plants around the world. But you need to plant them someplace where they won't disturb them. Because there's nothing worse than having one that's so beautiful and precious. So one whole thing is new. Next. Here's a very small container. In fact, this isn't a container at all. This is an old statue my parents got in Europe. And I noticed one day after I had been picking apart some succulents that it had this crack barrel. It's a monk testing the wine level in the barrel, looking a little hopeful there. Anyway, there was a crease where the barrel comes down, and so I just stuck that in there. And then I thought, oh, I should give it some soil. So I took about half a cup of sort of peaty soil and stuck it down there again and throw it. That's how easy succulents are. They grow out of cracks and rocks. They grow out of solid ground. They don't need much soil. They don't need that organic soil. Do not plant succulents in that potting mix, which is full of clay and cow manure and wood shavings. Do not want a huge amount of organic matter. That's one of the things about succulents. They don't need much fertilizer. I only do mine once a year, if that. You can tell. They'll grow too fast if you fertilize them. Also, the thing about drought-tolerant plants, if you give them fertilizer, they need water to metabolize. So you're turning your plant into a crack addict if you fertilize it when it's out of season, when it's not in active growing season. All right, next we say goodbye to this was another one. I had some of these little hybrid aloes. You've seen these, right? I have yet to see a big one. They're very new on the market. They're kind of spreading around, but these were not happy where they were. So I said, die or grow. And so I pulled them all up and laid them out and let them dry out for 3 months. And then I cleaned off all the rotted parts and spread them out and looked at them then. Chopped off any little pups that I could spread the plant further, and then put them in a pot to see how they'd look. And I let them sit there for a couple of weeks. Don't have to rush to plant these. Let them sit out. When in doubt, let it sit out. It will not die. If you water it right away, put it in dirt right away. Next. Oh, here's the easy
No,
one.
right there.
All right, this one, this is not a container. This is my front yard. It's 4 inches of gravel. Remember, all of these plants are less than a year in the ground. And the big ones in my old garden, some of them had root balls that were too big for me to dig up. So I just sawed them off at the ground. Cactus, Forbia, aloes, everything but agaves. I just cut them off at ground level, let them dry for 2 months, stuck them in the ground, and they've all grown. So next, you went the wrong way.
No, that's the one.
Question, why wouldn't you keep the roots of some of your?
Some of them were too big to dig up. That I couldn't get the root. I would have mangled it. And the nice thing about these succulents, if you get a little bit of root, or even if you can't get any root, if you let them dry out, they will root from that succulent tissue. That's what the fun part is. Yes, next. Ground cover succulents. Okay. So you can grow from seed. That's another thing. They're very easy from seed. They will sprout. You have to have a little patience for some things. Again, you have to coddle the seedlings only for a very brief time before they're on their own. Succulent gardening gives you the ability to plant an instant garden like I did mine. Just with pieces and parts, and in a couple of months, it's already thriving in a way that woody shrubs could not possibly do. Next. Shade. Succulents, for the most part, tend to be sunlight, right? If you think about the water hardness. But things like haworthias and a lot of those little conophytums and lithopsis, those South African juicy ones, they actually do not want to be in the full sun. They will scorch because they're just like little sponges and they can sunburn. And also in their native habitat, those things that we, see as the valves and baby toes and all those things, they're normally up to their eyeballs in sand during the windy period, the cold period, the winds are up. So they're pretty much covered up in shelving, and then for a few months of the year, the winds blow the other way and clear them off. But they can take some shade, and some succulents actually require semi-shade or early morning sun. When in doubt, if you're not sure about sunshade, start out with morning sun when the air is cool. You all know that, right? Regardless. What's the hottest part of your property? The southwest. Right? Go through every farmhouse in Iowa, and there's always a big tree on the southwest corner of the house. Whether an elm or cottonwood. Next. And then we have the aloes, of which there are a gracious plenty. How many of you have aloes? See that big common ones like the arboretums? Those really cute tiny ones. There are so many species. They all have the similar growth habit. Some of them, well, not all. Some of them are monopodial, one stem, that's it. But most of them branch, which is one of the nice treats about aloes. Also, they're very free flower compared to these succulents. So the aloes striata right now are blooming coral colored candelabra flowers. Some are spikes, some are individual. Aloe placata, the one with parallel strap-shaped leaves. Now Kumara decided it wasn't really in a club, so now it's Kumara placata. But they're lovely, and you can use them at any scale. That's another thing. The reason I showed this, we're talking about containers, but you can do big containers with some big aloes, and they love it. Hot, dry, wood constricted, no diseases, no water. They just love it. And remember that many plants, especially herbaceous plants, bloom best when they're stressed. The plant's getting a message, oh, conditions are bad, I'm going to die, I better flower and make seed right now before it's too late. So you often, like pelargoniums, but all the South African pelargoniums, also succulent stems. And there are some succulent stems that are really big in pelargonium. Have you ever seen those? How many have been to Geraniaceae, Rose Robin Paris? It's up there near annuals, somewhere in the Flats of Richard. Don't be up there. 600 varieties and species of pelargoniums, all based in South Africa. That's their center of divergence. Why was I talking about that? Oh yeah, because the example, if you fertilize and water them, you'll get a lot of leaves. Now some of them are growing for those colored green cookies, but if you want them to flower, they need to be stressed. Same with your petunias and your marigolds and all those other summer annuals. If you keep fertilizing and watering them, they're going to make more leaves, fewer flowers. So especially something to watch out for with your succulents. Yes. Okay, drainage. Drainage is comparative, but I was Googling this thinking, let me see about people who think you can plant plants without drainage. And believe me, I want you to go home and look that up. Who needs drainage? I'm thinking all plants need drainage. It's a system. It's not a one-way street, right? Okay. And look at the table of contents. They're telling you, can you use pots without drainage holes? Oh, yeah. And how do you do it? Oh, I put a layer of something. So the pot choice, okay, obviously your pot choice is no holes. That's the succulent choice. What the hell you're going to kill it? So add a layer of what? It's a closed bottom, right? Imagine you were sewed up the bottom end of your system. How did waste get out? Seriously, water, when you water a plant, especially a succulent that's completely dry between waterings, you want the water to come out the bottom. The water should come out the bottom. Don't have it on your furniture. Don't put it in your living room. Take it to the kitchen sink or put it in the bathtub if it's big. The water must come out the bottom. Otherwise, you get all those little salty white deposits around your pots, which eventually will have an effect on the plant growth. So add a layer of charcoal. Wow, just leave it wet. Add a layer of succulent cactus mix. So that's good advice. We use worm compost. Not really. They don't need all that pyrogenic stuff. Let the succulents settle in for their deathbed because they're going to die. The whole idea that you can do, I put rocks in the box. I just want to slap them. I put crushed beer cans or put, bubble wrap. None of that will do anything. What you're talking about is a plant that this has to be part of a larger system. And in a container, that system is a hole in the bottom. And if you really are in doubt, you can want to buy, if you buy fancy pots, you also need to buy a diamond drill. Otherwise, you recommend to shatter that expensive pot that you bought in Santa Fe. You'll feel really good. But if you want to use it for plants, drill holes in the bottom, and you can drill more than one, not a problem. Seriously, it's got to have drainage. This makes me furious when I see all this stuff, tips and tricks, hacks for the plant lover. You know, they're not saying about surgery, tips and tricks for heart surgery. We're talking about expertise, education, you know, knowledge. They're not tips and tricks. These are like laws of nature. Water in, waste out. Next, oh yes, so must have drainage. Yeah. I can't resist being sarcastic when I'm talking about it. Doesn't it bother you when you see something so glaring and obvious? Like a soggy plant sitting sideways. Oh, it just wants to die and it won't let it. You know, we all kill something, right? You have to test the parameters of your planting sometimes. That doesn't mean you kill all of them. And here we are, where the pots are more important than the plants. And what are the labels? The labels are not plants. The labels are the design on the pots. And do you think these little pots have holes in them? No, they don't. They're sitting on the books. They're sitting on the table. I call this an abomination. Unworthy in the sight of the book. I also understand that when you have a really spectacular plant, it doesn't need an additional spectacular pot. I'm a firm believer in good old terracotta clay pots that they do. Next.
There it
And
is.
there's one right there. What's wrong with that? Not fancy enough. You can put glitter on it or something. You can whitewash it. You can stain them with tea bags. You can make them look older. You can go for lichens. There's all sorts of things you can do to make your pots fancier. But what you want is a pot that breathes. So plastic glazed pots, they have no oxygen and no moisture. Roots need air and water, especially succulents. They need air and water. So a good soil mix is 50% solid matter, 25% airspace, 25% water space. And that's for temporary plants, not necessarily succulents. Succulents, it can be even less water space and even more airspace. So a gritty mix. I like cactus and what do they call it? Citrus and palm mix. Why they call it that? It's got a little bit of bar fabric, so it's some organic, but it's not full of rich nutrients, which makes your succulent unhappy. Next, please. Oh yeah. So plastic glazed pots, temporary is fine. There are some plants that really don't mind cut off from their air supply, but it's always a danger. It's always a risk. The plastic, especially, when it's too hot. The nice thing about terracotta is it has backwards cooling because the moisture comes out. Yes, you know, when you water your pot, you see the water through the side. That means that the moisture is coming out. It's air exchange. So that's what you want to see. And then I already mentioned, don't put a big plant in a small container. On the other hand, don't put the small plant in a huge container. Why? Because they're usually not going to get enough air. And if you water a big pot, it's going to overwhelm the tiny root system of the tiny succulent out there. So try this. The main thing about succulent gardening is you have to be prepared to manipulate them. It's not like something you put in a pot, that just flip it and goes on for years and years. You have to be willing to break off pieces, to repot them, to play with them. That's why they're fun. You really interact with succulents. Next, please. Oh, Mark's said that. Let it repeat.
Maybe.
Oops. One way to ensure that your tendril succulents, especially these lithopsis, is to water them from the bottom. Same way with your African violets or all your gesnerias that are rot sensitive. If you put the pot in water that goes up maybe halfway up the side, in the kitchen or some kind of container, let it start from the bottom and then let it drain again. But the other thing I wanted to say about this picture that you see online a lot like this, those aren't living plants. They have been cut off. They've been cut off for this picture. They sawed them right off their little roots and stuck them in. And well, you've seen decorations, this, I don't know, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Interior designers who bought stacks of old books and cut the backs off them and glued them to boards.
Yeah.
An instant library.
Okay.
But no books.
Yeah.
Just the spines. That's how they do these things. Just for one moment of photography, they killed all those plants. Next. So, what's your choice here? Cutesy plant containers. I mean, look, they don't even care about those plants. Those don't have roots in either. They cut them off and stuck them in there for the photo. It's a travesty. I know. Do you like those pots? You know, put jelly beans in them. They'd be better for some other container use, but not for plants. And besides, you know, nobody even cares about those. They're gonna die. Next. So here's a container, which is really a container. This is the space between my driveway and a planting bed that somebody poured some concrete in. So there's about a 3-inch gap. And well, it's too small to put gravel, it'll just pop out. But it's not too small to stick succulent there. And so one of those turned into this in 6 months. They like it warm, they like it cramped, they like those roots. Should not go wrong sticking a succulent anywhere you feel like it, as long as it gets sun. Like sun. Next. So always be ready to clip. When you go to your friend's house, bring a big saw and a clipper. Make sure you're not observed too long lingering over those succulents. If you're so cool, you've never seen one like that. So as long as there's no witnesses and no harm done, if you have to know how to take a piece of the plant off without leaving a trace. How many of you can do that? And if you can't tell, then it didn't happen. I'm not advocating theft, but you know, sharing plants is a time-honored tradition. So you can't always, you can always take a piece of succulent off. If it's too big, don't wait. Don't wait till it falls off. Don't wait till it gets too big for its pot. Take it apart, repot it. Take the whole thing out and repot just a small piece of it. And give some to your friends. This is the easiest. People are so amazed and thrilled to give them a little combination pot, 6 or 7 easy succulents, and stick them in there, sprinkle some gravel on them. They go nuts like that, you know, just give the birth or something. Now, it's so easy to make gifts out of succulents. I mean, and it looks like you spent days doing it. It's a matter of minutes once you have enough stock built up. So also remember that plants do not heal. Animal tissues heal. So when we have a wound, it closes up. Our system breaks down the dead or dying cells and carries them away. The ones on the surface dry up and flake away, and it actually replaces flesh. Plants do not heal. They don't replace flesh. The best thing they can do is grow over it. So if you take a branch off a tree, sometimes you'll see the tissue around. Unless you cut it flush with the trunk, you'll see the. I really can't handle this thing, can I?
But no, it's top is on top.
On
You're talking
top of this.
Yeah. Directional mic.
Clear when you speak.
Now I feel like Elvis. Oh, that's good advice. Okay, sorry. Anyway, where was it?
Healing.
Healing. Plants don't heal. They cover up their wound if they can. They have enough energy and enough cell tissue. Some plants will not recover from a wound. That's when you cut off the damaged piece. Start with fresh tissue above. So with succulents, you can always cut off. If it's soft, if it's rotten, if it's brown, if it's not healthy green stem or leaf, cut back until it is. Very easy to do. What's this one? Something about composition. This is another little crack between two sideways papers. So I'm showing that the space is too small for a succulent. Next. Color composition. This one didn't show it as well in the slide as it does the person, but you know, from the chartreuse to the dark purple euphorbia, the echeveria in between, the golden barrel cactus. All of these grow at different rates. So here's another clue for your succulent container or succulent garden. Plant a combination of things that will get bigger, things that will stay small. And when the bigger things get too big, you can start moving small things away. Or you can trade around, take the big things out and start them over again. But this is what I mean about playing with them. You need to be able without any qualms to tip out your succulents, rearrange them, put them back in, cut them into pieces. But definitely don't just let them sit. They like the stimulation of starting over. It resets their juvenility, more likely to get better blooming and better growth on a new cutting than an elderly plant. Next. Oh, this one. These are all euphorbias, part of my African journey here. And those all came without roots. Those branches were taken off trees that I could not pull out of my garden. So I stuck them in. It took them a few months to root and now they're growing. So again, last year that was bare dirt. These were leftovers that it wasn't even a dish garden. I had no plan with this. I just threw them in a pot because I didn't want to throw them out. That's what happened. So when you repackage it, give it to somebody, they think you just slaved over it, but you didn't. Next. Oh, other way.
It was, yeah.
Where's another duplicate?
Yep.
Oh, this one. This one is another abomination. Number one, cactus do not like to grow in interior rooms with no direct sunlight. Number two, these again have no roots. They were cut off for the photograph and stuck in this thing. And you know, people look at this and think, I want that. And they go and they buy $100 worth of succulents, fancy pot, and take them home to die. This is all about death, isn't it? Actually, it's about avoiding death. The succulents can live forever. They eternally rejuvenate themselves through propagation. But this one, it's doomed. And where's the hole? You don't think they water it, you know, on their bookshelf with the hole? No, no. Next. This is my little greenhouse. I didn't. My last house had an actual greenhouse, so this is all of my staging one. These are the plants that mostly succulents, but they cannot get winter rain. So they have to stay inside. A lot of them move out for the summer, but then they have to come back in when the rains start. But a lot of things going on. These syningias, silver leaves there. You know syningia? Orange flowers. It's another Gloxinia. What's the family? African violets, Gesneriaceae. Gesneriaceae. Another really good succulent, and those can take a lot of shade. So the syningias, if you want, you've seen grandma's African violets on her windowsill for years and all those, but the Gesneriaceae can, because they're from the rainforest where they get in Brazil, where they get only 2% light anyway, so they can adapt to a bright windowsill or even darker. Sansevierias, mother-in-law tongue, snake plant, those. How many of you had those? It's jocular. How many of you had with bloom? They're incredibly fragrant. So you have your snake plant, it's growing there in the corner, it's been there for 15 years. And one day you go in there and there's the bloom spike coming up 3 feet above the plant. And then it opens up and it smells like perfumed soap. It's a very powerful odor. And why did it bloom? Because it didn't overwater it. And it's maybe dying soon, so maybe I should. But now you can get a bloom every year if you manage your Sansevierias. They bloom spectacular. So if you have a plant that doesn't bloom, you have to ask yourself why. Because you know it wants to. What's keeping it from blooming? That's the question. Next. Oh, here's another pathetic little thing. Not only did they cut them off, they couldn't even stick them in straight.
Yep.
Someday, I'm a member, actually, I'm the chief of the plant police. I go to people's houses and take plants away from them. They're not thriving. Failure to thrive. And then they get all, no, back. Cruel and say, no, if you could bring it back, it wouldn't have gotten its way in the first place. And take it away to make it healthy. And then they say, oh, well, will you bring it back? This is not a welcome home for this college. You may not have it back and they give it to somebody. So it's really, plants are malleable. You know, you have to have a relationship with them. They're not just furniture. And that's another problem with American consumerism. They buy a shrub and think of it as furniture. They don't think about how big it's going to grow in front of the front door. So you have all these cubic plantings that you don't tell where the entry is. That's the shrubbery is taken over. That's another branch. Onward. Here's another cut off one. I put this in to show the color range of these succulents because they really can be spectacular. And you know what makes them even more spectacular? Stress. Cold stress, drought stress. You'll have a perfectly plain green succulent rosette and it gets stressed and it starts purple or red or yellow. And it's not a sickness, it's just the balance between the chlorophyll and the other carotenoids and color compounds in the leaves. Right, so
Yeah, I did too fast.
I wanted to say something about the range.
There we go.
So all of these, if you grew these with a lot of fertilizer in the shade, most of them would be fairly dull and green. So these are colorful because they've been a little bit stressed. And in fact, if these were temperature stressed, they'd be even brighter. So again, you can experiment, and that's the nice thing about succulents too. They're so easy to properly try it. Yes. It's a clay tray. Those things are all just cut off. They're not meant. And besides which, if you did plant that one tightly, in 3 weeks, they'd be crowded to get out. Which again, when you have a succulent pot, you have to be ready to pull 1 or 2 out or to cut some back. You've got to manipulate it to keep them all healthy. That being said, this would probably go for a year and they would actually start popping out of that tray. Next. And the reason why I put up this is because these are not stressed at the moment, but that one gets red and that one gets purple the colder it gets. So it's the cotyledon there on the pig's ears. Yes.
That's the detail on a stretch. The article of
Mhm.
I said that to you.
Can you repeat question?
Well, say that again.
Is it not tricky trying to?
It's tricky trying to stress it. You don't really have to try. What you have to do is let nature have its way with it. When it gets hotter or colder, you don't have to run and take it inside. Another thing about succulents, some of them have to go in the winter, go inside. The others can stay out if you lay them out on the sun, just as long as they don't accumulate water. And it seems funny, but the neighbors came by one morning in February and all my big pots were on their side, like the wind had blown them over. All agog, but no, it's just to keep them from rotting. But here, I wanted to say that the color ranges, even when they're not stressed, are quite spectacular. Next. And this is my own little challenge. You saw my front yard. This is my backyard. It's a cliff. It was all poison oak and acacia and other invasive species a year ago. And I've spent the last year on my hands and knees like a monkey because it's really, really steep. And I'm doing it all in succulents. And then I'm planting shrubs, South African, Californian, and Australian shrubs, which eventually will stabilize the entire hillside, but peppered with succulents that will get very large. So ideally, in a couple of years, there will be no dirt visible. And it's extremely steep. And I was not going to have paths or anything to distract the garden. But after one particularly long fall, I decided. Right, and then my son came and said he wanted me to wear a rope and tie it to one of my posts every time I was in the garden. And to make sure to keep my phone in case I can't get up.
What kind of large succulents are you planting?
Euphorbias, aloes, agaves, like agave americana, which get huge. The divaricata aloes, the tree aloes, they get to about 12, 14, 15 feet tall. Some serious cactus, the Peruvian ones that get really organ pipes and things like that. I need to get some yucca, although I don't think they like the Mediterranean as well. But yuccas really like a harsh desert. They don't like much water even in wintertime. I think they might be a little too sensitive for here. It is possible to have succulents that cannot handle even what short rainy seasons we normally have here. But this year was a total exception. I think bank on any of it. So it's interesting. I put in a lot of bulbs in here too. So it's going to be color, solid, massive mosaic of color year round. And this is what I call the candy box approach. It's not designing like a big sweep of this color, trying to do like a fabric design where you're trying to actually say something with the arrangement. This is peppered with all sorts of things, all different sizes and colors. And as the bloom sequence goes, there'll be something for 12 months of the year. Yes. No, that was all the natural soil there. And funnily enough, on this side, it looks like decent soil. It's kind of black topsoil. That was when they developed that ridge. They scraped all the topsoil off the top. And so, but down below, it is solid clay, like adobe making clay. So there was some slippage as the soil started getting saturated, it started riding over the clay. But amazing, even just with only less than a season's growth, that hill did not move. Which was astonishing. One more, I think, this one. just to show you how it goes. I feel like my little walkways, I know. But I don't advise this. I didn't think age was a problem, but I discovered this year that perhaps there might be some limitations as to how many times I can pull down. With a 15-gallon pot on a tree on a slope like that, but I did it. Anyway, pin a star on me, but it's going to be fantastic, and I will be happy to give tours in a couple of years. But I also want to see you at the Arboretum. You have to come. Right now, in particular, the South Africans and the Australians are blooming like mad. The hummingbirds are going crazy. You know, pupuyas, the bromeliads, our petunia, our Puya bertoniana, the one of the really tall ones is blooming now. It's a turquoise blue that you've never seen before. It's a color that's undescribable, and the flowers could either be waxy or metallic. You can't tell. It's an incredible combination of color, and the pollen, the stamens, are brilliant orange. So one of our birders came running in with this discovered a new kind of bluebird, Well, the Puyas all have a nectar reward on each flower, and the birds come out with orange mohawk. So they're all had brilliant orange mohawks.
Only in Santa Cruz.
It was a new species. You know, burgers, they're always lying. Such and such. That's why I like plants. They don't fly away. They don't have to wait for hours in silence. Who gets bitten by snakes? Bird people are always looking up, walking out. Plant people, look what I found! Plant people are always, yelling at each other and looking down their feet. So we don't get snake bites nearly way bird people. This is from someone who worked in the tropics for a long time. Next. Oh, that's the lower part. Somebody used broken sidewalk pieces about 50 years ago.
Still
And then
there.
they took grape stakes, like a fence, laid it in as a pathway. Very weird. That's fine. Oh, and here's one of my other favorite things. What you can do with your succulents to really, really make them upset. Do you remember Goldfinger when the girl was painted gold and she supposedly died because she suffocated because she still couldn't breathe? Well, that's what happens with these. The first time I saw little mammillaria cactus with the straw flowers hot glued on the top of them. Have you ever bought one of those? I thought I bought it for the cactus. You can't get it off without ripping the tissue off, and so you kill the crown, and it's horrible. But this is an abomination that even Jesus couldn't forgive. The spray paint. You've seen this, right? These are little aloes or gasterias or something, and all they want to do is live. And look at that. Why not buy the plastic ones? Because these are going to die. And the colors themselves, I mean, is that subtle or what? I don't know, but you go into Home Depot and you think, where are these people buying this from? They're sold across the country. Next. And this is one that I put together a couple of weeks ago. The geraniums had already rotted out. Thought they would make it, but they didn't. They just, even color gunners, they couldn't take it. And the pot was too big to move over. So I pulled them out and put this in. These are from the front garden. That took me half an hour to do start to finish. No. It was fresh soil. The pots were all new last year. So well, I put out the drainage and let it dry for a day or two before it gets green, but it has an excellent drainage. That's why I didn't bother changing the soil. And again, if you dry the edges and stuff, if you don't have wet edges of your plants exposed, you don't need to change soil to get dry soil. You have to just let the plant dry out eventually. So this one is lots of fun. When you have succulents, you can mix big and small ones. You can play with the colors. You can do a color theme. But as you can tell from my rambling talk, I don't like that candy box approach. I like one of this or two of that, one of that, and then a little surprise somewhere. That is about 4 feet wide.
How deep is it?
Not very. That one's a tapered one.
So you built it into your deck or something?
No, it's sitting on a little roller thing. I have all my big plants on rollers so I can turn them. Also move them and I'll clean underneath them, but it's a good thing. You don't want to let this pot sit on your deck.
Right.
Spots and stains and all that stuff. So sometimes I use those little blade pot feet, which are excellent, but I like them on the rolling things. The rolling ones that could go through. So that's handicraft, you know, it's a half an hour of it's really fun. Next. And then here in conclusion is a little Orbea, Stipuliaceae. Yep, another South African. And why is it blooming on the ground, you asked? Because it's pollinated by flies and beetles, carrion eaters. And so it smells like chicken, mildly, but yet it's a definitely pungent odor, and that's what attracts pollinators. And here you have these little, actually, you can get much of the leaves. They're just sort of raw looking succulent leaves, and then these flowers that pop out. And then it's a tropical and then exotic, but this is going outside, unprotected in a gravel bed. So that might be it. What else I have to say? Are there any questions, criticisms?